Hello everybody and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be taking a look at a brand new Doctor Who story. Or not really a brand new Doctor Who story, but a new Doctor Who story, sort of. With a brand new animation. After 50 years of it being missing, it's still missing. But we have an animation for it. It's The Power of the Daleks! So I'm just going to give you a quick review focusing on the animation, the story itself, because I've never seen the story. I must say that right now that I have never seen, before I watched this, I'd never seen Power of the Daleks in any form. I'd only ever seen the surviving clips, which made no sense to me because I'd never seen the story, never heard the audio or the telesnap reconstruction or anything like that. So this was pretty much completely new to me, this story, so it was a very interesting experience to have. So I'm going to focus on that and how the animation actually looks, and also on the DVD itself, because you might have not seen this. If you're not in the UK, you won't have seen this, and if you haven't got it yet, you won't have seen it. So I might as well start with the DVD, why not? Alright, sorry about that, my camera's died. It's a rather temperamental setup I've got going on at the moment. But yeah, we still have the slipcase for a standard. It doesn't look like the normal classic series covers, which is a bit annoying. So I just kind of ignore the slipcase, whatever, it's just a piece of card really. But then thankfully we get a reversible cover, so as you can see here, we have a DVD cover that looks exactly like the rest of the classic range, including the side of it. So that's pretty nice, unless you're in another country where you might not get it. I don't really know. Apologies if you don't. So that's really good that it fits nicely in with the whole collection on the old shelves. Obviously, it is an animated cover, which some people have commented about. As you can see, it's actually rather than using real people, but I think that's fair enough. It is fully animated. It would be misleading advertising, I think, if you put real sort of pictures on here when there isn't actually any real footage other than 6 minutes of old footage on here. So I think that's fair enough. And well, inside you've got the standard stuff really. A couple of discs, and you've got some decent production notes actually, rather than the normal Doctor Who, Classic Who little booklet things. You get a whole Andrew Pick. You know, I might have found Andrew Pixley. He does lots of stuff for Doctor Who magazine and whatnot. He's a Doctor Who historian kind of guy. And there's like 6 or 7 pages of long-winded production notes, as you can see. I won't read it all now, I haven't read it yet, but there you go. And lots of information in there, as you can see. So it's a decent DVD release. I mean, I had to pay 14 quid for it, which is probably a little bit excessive. But I held off from buying the what do you call it, the digital online version. I thought I'm just going to go straight for DVD because that's how I roll. So I did, and as you can see, it's a very solid DVD release. You've got your standard documentary, making of documentary, you've got a bit of the surviving footage, which was good because there's 6 or 7 minutes of that, so it's nice to see. And watching it after I've seen the story and the animation, it actually fits in to be able to see this bits of footage and actually be able to place it in the story. So that's a nice thing to have. And there's a few sort of animation test footage on there and stuff as well, which I think that should bring me on. Covered the DVD, let's move on to the animation itself. So before I sort of critique it, I think the background to this should be that looking on the DVD, they have a little video which has an original animation test, which before they had been commissioned to make the actual whole animation, the people, I can't remember what the company were, some people at some company, animation company, had to make a little sort of 3-minute kind of test footage thing to give to the BBC Worldwide and say, here's how it will look, do you want us to do it? And this was done in April this year. So they didn't actually start animating it at all until at least May or June of this year. And it was a 2.5 hours, a 2.5 hour story, 2.5 hours of animation to be made in like 3 or 4 months, which is quite challenging, I would imagine. I mean, I'm not an animator, I don't really know much about animation, to be fair. But I imagine that must have taken quite a lot of flat-out effort to be able to get it on, because they obviously wanted to release it in time for 50th anniversary of Power of the Daleks, which was just easy marketing and everything, blah, blah, blah. But clearly it left them a bit tight on time, so they had to really press on and get the animation done. And it does show, in some places, it does show with it being a little bit sort of... It's not terrible animation, but there are just some moments where you feel like they could have done a better job of it. I mean, particularly with some of the main characters, like Patrick Troughton, it does feel like he only has about 6 or 7 different facial expressions. They've sort of, at the start of the animation, at the start of the whole production, they've created 7 or 8 different Patrick Troughton facial expressions and then just inserted them in when he does something. Or like, he's shocked, let's put this expression in kind of thing. It very much feels like that, because that's one of the sort of keys of Patrick Troughton's portrayal of the Doctor, is how he uses his face and the weird movements he's got going on with this kind of thing. And it does feel like that's a little bit lost at times in the animation. It just feels like it's slightly lacking, so that was a little bit disappointing. It's not by no means terrible, but it is just a little bit lacking. And a couple of other things I did notice with the animation were that there was a couple of scenes I noticed where you could hear a Dalek rolling along the floor in the audio, but nothing was happening on screen. The Daleks were just static, so it was just kind of like they'd failed to animate that at all. So, and yet they left the audio bit in. So that was slightly odd that they'd sort of done it and still left the audio in. So I'm not too sure about why they did that. And there was a shot that I can't remember which episode it was from. If I can find it, I might put it up on the screen, but I don't think I'll be able to find it because it's a 2.5-hour story. It's quite long. There was one where I think it's the Doctor steps into this new big room, and it's got this long panning shot around the room, and it just looks sort of very kind of blocky and like it's not smoothly moving across the screen of this whole new animation. It's almost like they're sort of going frame by frame. It looks a little bit sort of not very nicely sort of smooth transition panning shot, if I can get my words out. It's just a bit sort of cutty and jumpy and blocky, and it doesn't look that great to me. I just sort of thought, oh yeah, that's not that great, is it really? So I'm being very negative about this. I guess my final negative point, and then I will get on to the positives, would just be that in some stages, just because of the nature of the animation, you can't always quite get the feel of what's going on and what action is actually happening. It's just a little bit sometimes confusing if it hasn't been as sort of fully animated all over, and sometimes it's a bit static in the background. Like the other characters just are completely frozen and completely still when one character's at the front talking like the Doctor, and then there's some in the background that just aren't really doing anything. So it's a bit off-putting at times, I think. But I will get on to the positives now. Well, the positives are we have a 2.5-hour Doctor Who story that was completely missing, and now we have an animated copy to watch. I mean, that's quite something. The Daleks are the greatest strength of the animation. They look fantastic, and they move, and they just work fantastically throughout the animation. It really does. That's one of the strengths. Those sort of scenes at the end of episode 4, when you have the whole Dalek production line, as it were, being created, with the Daleks being created and all this stuff, it just looks brilliant. It really does. It's all these Daleks, because you can really create that, whereas you couldn't in real life. It didn't look as good as it sort of did in the animation because you only had four Daleks. Whereas now it really, and a board with a load of Daleks sort of painted onto or pictured onto the background, that you kind of does look like it's a bit just a sort of painting or picture of it in the background. So to be able to actually have all these actual sort of live Daleks and not just pictures of ones, it really does enhance it, I think, and makes that scene at the end. That's probably the highlight of the 6 parts, I think, would be those last 2 or 3 minutes of episode 4 where you've got this whole Dalek production line and them all going exterminate, screaming and blah blah blah. The audio is actually really good on that. I sense it might have been re-recorded. It just sounds a bit better than everything else, the audio of that scene. I don't know if it's because there's a better quality audio of just that scene or something, but just the exterminates and stuff, it just sounds a little bit different and a little bit better. So let me know if that has actually been changed, if you know it has actually been changed or not. I'm not quite sure. But it did just sound noticeably better than... The sound quality in general is very, very good. I mean, they've got 5.1 surround sound, which I was quite impressed with. So I have to have a look at that a little bit more detail afterwards. But it was good to have that nice... It was very good sound quality overall, I thought, which is a testament to all these old recordings. Thank you to all these people who, when they were bored and sat in front of the TV in the 1960s recording all the audio off the TV, the episodes. It really has made it such a great pleasure 50 years later to actually be able to still listen and watch these stories. And well, I guess I should finally actually pick up on the actual plot of the story, as I've never seen it before, which focuses, of course, if you haven't seen it yet, spoiler alert kind of, but I mean it's a 50-year-old episode, so I don't think we can quite spoiler alert a 50 years ago story. But yeah, it focuses on the Daleks and how they have no power. They don't have enough. They've been trapped in this sort of world, and they don't have enough power to be able to use their machine. They're sort of to rebuild themselves, rebuild their whole planet. Well, not planet, but their race. Create lots of new Daleks and everything. So they all being very evil and pretending to sort of help the humans. A bit like Victory of the Daleks in Series 5. Just better, really, than that one. Obviously, Victory of the Daleks is referencing Power of the Daleks. We finally see that, whereas I hadn't seen that before. I didn't know that, really, but I looked it up and found out, oh yeah, they're referencing it, weren't they? And so with Power, we see Daleks at their sort of scheming best, pretending to be helpful. And I love there's a couple of moments where you can kind of tell that they want to sort of go rage and say, we're superior to humans, blah, blah, blah. And he starts or goes... And then stops himself, the Dalek, because he realises, actually no, we have to pretend to be helpful. We've got to pretend to be helpful. Come on, sort this out. So it's sort of like the Daleks are kind of fighting their own kind of will to be able to kill people and everything. And I just thought that was my favourite moments when the Daleks sort of about to go off on a whole rant and exterminate stuff, and he's sort of, oh no, I'm your servant. I'm going to help you. Blah blah blah. And I just love those sort of moments. So it's brilliant to see the Daleks in that mode, and it really shows them to be kind of terrifying in that sense. They can be so evil and scheming and secretive, and then turn up at the end and kill everyone, essentially. And it also shows how misguided the humans are as well. The rebel dudes who are trying to take over this city and planet and stuff by using the Daleks, and of course it backfires and kills them all. What a surprise! I'm not really surprised. And so overall that just all creates a great plot, I think. Patrick Troughton, I'm not sure Patrick Troughton in this story. He's very odd, I think would be the best way to describe it, particularly early on. I know it's obviously a lot of it's down to the whole post-regeneration trauma thing. Obviously this was the first time it ever happened, it wasn't even called regeneration trauma at that time. But he does just seem a little bit strange and very different to what he is throughout the rest of his tenure, I find. I think a lot of people have said it's probably one of his weaker performances as the Doctor, and I think that's probably true. And it's simply because it's his first ever episode, it's his first story, trying to get a feel for the role and get into the role. And I think he does, by the end he's doing a better job of it, and he does sort of start to feel, yeah, this is the second Doctor kind of thing. But early on, it's all a bit hard to read quite what's going on with him. But the companions do a great job of this. It was very well written, the way that sort of Ben in particular is very, very sceptical of is this the Doctor? Even though they've watched him change in front of their eyes, they're still very sceptical about whether this is actually the Doctor or not, and they're sort of trying to test him and trying to understand, is this actually the Doctor or not? Particularly Ben. Polly kind of just sort of says, oh, I know this is the Doctor, I'm sure it's the Doctor. But Ben's a lot more like, well, the Doctor used to do this, do you do this kind of thing? And so it's just a very interesting dynamic following that through as they kind of gain some trust of him throughout the episode. I think we see that with a lot of sort of post-regeneration stories, to be fair, in Doctor's first stories, with the companions gaining a bit of trust in the Doctor and whatever. But it is just nice to see it in this one, in the very first time it's happened, really. It ever happened with a regeneration, to actually get a feel and to see what it was like the very first time that a new person played the Doctor. Obviously we can't get a complete 100% representation because it isn't the original episode, it is an animation, and it's not 100% perfect, but it is it's a very, very good story and a very solid animation of it. And so overall, kind of thinking about, would I like them to make more of these in the future, I think I echo some of the thoughts of some other YouTubers that I've seen talking about this, which was particularly with this animation, was that it was good, but I'd prefer to wait longer for a better animation if that's an option. If the only option was we get this sort of animation out or no animation at all, then absolutely I'd take it. Of course, a visual form of a decent visual form of watching old Doctor Who that's missing is fantastic. But if there was the option to maybe have to wait an extra 6 months or a year between releases, but to get a much better quality animation, this isn't terrible, but to get a better animation than this, I think I'd be willing to kind of accept that, because I think it's good, but it can be improved, really. So overall, I really hope they do some more. Maybe it's 50th anniversary of Evil of the Daleks next year. There's a hint, guys. Doctor Who BBC Worldwide. Think you should get on that. Do it. Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, overall I just thought it was brilliant. It's a really good DVD release as well. I'd recommend picking it up. I believe it's out in the UK obviously now. The whole Blu-ray special edition thing comes out in the UK in February next year, I believe, with a whole colour version and Blu-ray and HD and all this stuff and blah blah blah. I might get that as well, I don't know, depends how I feel. And I think it comes out in the US in January next year. I think you probably know better than me, American viewers. Let me know, but I think it's January next year. So I would definitely recommend, if it's come before Christmas, put it in your Christmas list if you haven't got it already. It's definitely worth a watch. It's a solid animation of an amazing story, I think is the best way to describe it. So thank you very much for watching this video, guys. Remember to like and subscribe. Comment what you thought about this story, about the animation, about anything you like really relating to this, and let me know what you thought. I'd love to hear how you thought the animation was as well, because I just want to hear different opinions, really. It's always great to have different opinions, so please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Goodbye.